I'm going to talk about accessibility. How can we eat this? But before talking about this, I would like to talk about disability and the word disability. This word is what we know like as an umbrella term. Is a word or a sentence that get together a lot of concepts. For example, the bird word includes every type of bird. Using these terms is become with some problematic based as how our brain works. So the principle of linguistic activity is directly related with our language. So in the same way, we tend to abstract. This is not a problem when we talk about things or birds, but when we talk about persons or gender issues or right issues, is when we face several problems. So it's the same when I use disability word. Each and every one of us thinking something different, and at the same time, many thinks the same thing. Maybe someone in a wheelchair or a blind person. So the interpretation of this word will be different depending of the people. And that's the reason why it's so complicated to have this definition for disability. Some years ago, there was a glossary of translation words, Samori, a language in Polynesia, and there's this Waikaka. And translated to Spanish or English means disability. But their vision is to have force and skills in another way. So this word was very specific or highlight this gaining this skill. So the idea of this glossary for using words without a negative burden. And as we know, words are charged with positive or negative things. So if we go to the dictionary, so disability is a restriction or absence of a capacity in an activity that it considers normal. But what is normal? So based in this definition, the definition of normal, something that is normal in a culture is not necessarily means the same in another culture. And another in another ways, it's associated with some diseases. The WHO says that also disability talks about impediments, restriction in the participation in the day-to-day life, and limits also the activities. As we see, it's kind of difficult to have just one meaning for this word. Also, we have this mismatch between the skills or abilities of a people and their environment. So we can say, non-accessible environments create impairment or disability. And now we have accessibility. What is this? Is the possibility to access. But the principle is to reduce or get rid of these barriers that has the disability people of their rights, spaces, things, information, etc. In the web concept, accessibility is that your product is available for any people or person in the world. So in the translation is this in the handbook accessibility guide is linked with the universal design. But why do we have to do this? Well, as I already mentioned, if you ask me, this should be because it's the correct thing, but this is not enough. If they will say, well, it will not necessary for me to be here, but let's understand what is happening. Let's go back a little bit in the on time, because the world we live in is in a state of constant change. So the only constant is change. A lot of years ago, we needed a whole room to have a computer, but right now, this is only in the type of the size of our hand. In other days, we saw like that, and now like these cookies, banners, alerts, pop-ups, a lot of things in the same screen. So technology change. The web is evolved in a The web is part of our everyday life, in our job, tax, learning new things, buying things. So in the pandemic times, it's a super important tool for many people. So we can say that in all this time, we increase the reach of the technology, of the internet, but at the same time is confused and is not accessible for a lot of things. As Eva mentioned in her keynote, what is this non-profit organization? They provide solution for this accessibility. In 2019, they organized an evaluation of the homepage, a popular homepage. How do they do that? Well, they use a tool and detect the problems in the pages that are not aligned with the guidelines of this NGO, and they compare standards and say this is working and this is not working. But as all the tools has the pros and cons, because some of them, well, almost 25%, and this is a great figure. This is the amount of errors or mistake, almost 60 million. It's an average of 69.6 per page. And with this, 97.8% of the pages analyzed, they had errors. For example, Instagram, Facebook, Forbes, Reuters, Stanford, and a lot of more. This doesn't mean that it's only social media, but university, news, pages, so it's pretty important. But why is this happening? As I mentioned before, language and how we talk and reflect and how we interpret things. And also, I believe that we reflect our experience based on what our beliefs. There's this image of how we use the computer, how do we navigate or scroll, or we can distinguish the details, and there's nothing around us. But this is not real. But for some reason, everything that we do is this option or this vision. In one moment in our life, we are going to experiment in a different way, because every one of us experiment the web in different ways. Some of people will have difficulties for colors, other for other, or pains. For example, they can use the mouse, or they only have just one arm because they are with their babies in the other hand. So there's a lot of different options, but accessibility is almost forgotten or ignored. We wait that somebody complain, and then maybe we do some changes. Why? Because many times it's a lack of information, but now we know that it's important. So how can I do this? Yeah, well, I think that every one of us can apport or do something. It doesn't matter if you are tester, developer, business area, we all can do something. So let's go and see this. Let's see what are the mistakes or the errors. So my first advice is go back to the basics. This framework, we think that is going to change our life, a new technology, but to be updated, then we forget the basics. So my advice is review this concept. So the first thing is HTML. This must be semantic and with a structure. This means that use the correct tag in the correct place. We have a lot of tags: headlines, articles, bottoms, inputs, and a lot of more. All these tags has their own significance and place. For example, to generate this, the DOM, and you modify, and maybe it's useful for all the technology. They handle information, notes, because something are just visual. So we can say that the tree of accessibility is a sub part of the DOM, and it uses HTML. and their elements are working okay because it's the behavior is already established like that. So when we use the tag ag, the browser is like a link. So when we write down our HTML, we need to know that we are using the the tools. This is an example. This is an example div. If we need this button in the screen reader, they don't know how where is it or what is it, or so we cannot access with a keyboard if we do not put like an index or the correct tool. But once we put inspect with DevTool, we can see that there's not a lot of information. It's role generic, so it's just that amount of information. But if we have a button, for example, role bottom, you know, the location, what is, so we can it have a primary content, and with all this information it can be communicated to the user. So it's part of our job to decide the correct tag in our HTML. And if we are creating a element with a visible tag, it's okay. But you need to remember accessibility and to test all the roles and behaviors in order to function correctly, and the correct location. And we are talking about structure because the order of the navigation or the browser is according to the code and in logic. So in one study, it found out that more of 300,000 web page, they have problems with headings. And with the headings, there are some rules. We need to have H1 and write down the page and similar, and just one. And the rest of the headings is like a tab index. It must be presented in the different layers or levels, H1, H2, and then maybe at the end H5. And this is important because a lot of times headings is the people use these headings what just to know the idea of the page. So if this is not in order, it's confused. And the tab index, we use it carefully. It can be very good or very bad. This allowed us or help us some elements. For example, if we have a one tab index or greater than one, it's a specific order. We don't want to play with this because the element will be outside of the browser. If the tab index is 0, allowed us to have focus from the keyboard in the order of the browser or navigation. But we need to be sure that the behavior when focus and the keyboard is what you should be doing. For example, enter key or space key. So what happened when we click on those keys? In case of tab index equal to 1, this allowed us that some elements will be on focus. So in general, we can say that the element with a value bigger than 1 focus before elements without index or the value is 0. In the order of the elements, this can change. A lot of times we use CSS to change the order of the element, position absolute, and this can be confused because there are people that use screen readers, but again, visually see the pages. So the screen reader will read what is the things that in the order that he found it, but the user is seeing another thing. So we need to be careful about this. And again, HTML, semantic, and structure. All the people that are using technology or assisted technology can be used. And with this, let's pass to focus. So this is where the elements go in the keyboard. Some elements are default focus as input or buttons. And others like divs or sponge An easy way to know if we need focus is just to ask ourselves, can we interact with element? If it's yes, we need focus. The behavior, so somebody can access through keyboard. So for example, we have an input. We normally see this blue box, and one of the most common mistakes that we can find out is outline it in CSS. This line that is around the elements, we take it out because we think it's ugly, it's not according to our design. But this is a mistake because when we do that, we get rid of visual aid. In other example, if we leave it like that, it's not enough because the contrast is not enough, or maybe the font or the color is not good enough. But with CSS, we can do or improve this and arrange. We have these 4 properties: color, style, width, and offset, that measure the distance of the limit of the element. So we can put all the things according to our design. And when we use this one, for example, when the people, when they use the keyboard, somebody, for example, with permanent paralysis or problems in the wrist, that it can use only the keyboard, not the mouse. So this will be useful for all of them. Another topic which is very important in the web is color and contrast. So when we create products according to diversity, the election or the choose the color and contrast it, because color help users for information, or it's just the color of the brand, but not all the users see the colors in the same way. There are some people that need more help independently of the color. It doesn't matter if we have the most beautiful design in our webpage, if people can see it, well, like that. And about contrast is the difference in between the color or the representation of the object in the screen, etc. For example, in the real world, the difference is illumination and the things that are around that. But in the screen, we can say the difference between the background and the text, images, or whatever it is. An example, like this one, like this image, with all the colors. And if we apply a filter for somebody that has some disability in the eyes, it's like this. A lot of colors disappear. There's only red, blue, and something green. And when we applied for sensitivity to red, for example, people that cannot see the red color, is totally different. They will see only yellow and blue. So if we are trying to communicate information to the user only by color, well, it's not enough. In Trello, they have this colorblind friendly mode. So they put texture in these cards without changing color. They just add texture. So people that cannot distinguish colors, they can note the label of each box. Here we see the New York Times webpage. We see all the labels, and when we applied a filter, how people will see things is like that. It's very difficult to read. The image are not clear enough, and this is very common for the people, for the seniority people. So the content of our page is important, but must need be appreciated in different condition of light, and also to know that everyone can read our webpage. When we talk about color contrast, is text color and the background. So again, sensitivity A, double A, and triple A. This is a tool is color level. that measure the contrast between two colors. In the upside or in the upper part is more strict, is 7.21, and the other is failing. So this means that the colors on the bottom part will have some difficulty for somebody that has some impairment. So this is in a hip hop repository at the end. I mentioned already text and content. They play a very important role because we read the text, but not everybody read at the same level, or we have the same skills to understand. Even though if the text is as simple as one thing, there are people with some deficits, and this can affect the ability to understand the text. So what can we do in this case? Well, we need to take into account a simple language. With this is an logic order, the more important things at the beginning and the context that you are using, definition for some common words. So you need to be literally as possible. Again, think in those persons that have cognitive deficiencies. This means, for example, sarcasm is non-compressible. Talking about fonts, they are very small fonts and it's very difficult to read. So using the correct font, for example, sans serif without things at the end of the letter, so everything will be easier to read. And to maintain a short paragraph, because if it's very long, it's difficult to read. And if a user must zoom more than 400%, the space of the text will not change. All the information must be present. Talking about icons as fonts, and somebody is using their own font, will replace our font and everything will change. So also remember the icons. And also we need to edit the images in the context. Screen readers cannot read the text inside the images. Otherwise, we need an alternative. In the case of media, what I'm talking about are videos, audios, podcasts, etc. So if we have this slide in our webpage, we need to have captions or transcriptions. In captions, well, is a kind of a transcription, or in the same language or different language. So this is very useful for people that have problems to listen, but also that it's very common nowadays that in social media to find videos that are reproduced automatically. So all these video, for example, if it's in autoplay, uh, can distract somebody. For example, if somebody has epilepsy or for photosensitive, it can be a problem. Also, for screen readers, they cannot hear what is happening in the video. The screen reader is talking, the video is playing, and it's very difficult to understand the information. And more or less, all the content, gift, animation, videos, they need a switch to turn it off. So it must be a decision of the user, turn it on or turn it off, and not as mandatory feature. And last but not least, test, test, test. Automatic test can be also for accessibility, but it's not enough. So the better thing is manual text. Well, with all this knowledge, you can review in your web, in your page or your product to listen our website. In Mac, you have VoiceOver. In Windows, you can download a screen reader You have a Chrome voice extension and you can use it. And let's hear what your website says, the logic of your web page. And from there, having this sense, well, what about other person listening to this? Another thing, forget the mouse, unplug it, disable, and use everything with your uh, your keyboard. And if everything is accessible, well, with the mouse also it is. And at the end, who benefit with the accessibility? Well, everyone in some point in our lives. So take all your product and maybe go to the bin trash. No, there are some things that you need to change, and they are in the web, in almost of the website, and there is a lot of annoyance for many people. This means that small changes can have a big impact. Change all this can help a lot of people, but this is not all. It's not only of HTML structure. There's a lot of things that we can do. I can be here like 3 hours of everything that we can do to improve the web. But again, these small changes are important. And my last advice is, let's go out of the box. See the world from other perspective. Diversify your team, hire people with some disability, and again, test. Learn from others' experience, and with all that knowledge, you can put it into practice. Because I believe if all of us can do something, the web can be more accessible, inclusive among everybody. Thank you. This link is again of this chart.